Emmett has self-published 5 poetry books and released 5 poetry CDs, and they're behind you in front of me. So if you'd like to purchase some, you just talk to him after his reading. His latest CD, Welcome Home 2017, features one of Oregon's finest jazz pianists, Mr. James Blackburn. In 2014, 2016, and 2018, Emmett served on the nomination committee for selection of Oregon's Poet Laureate. He was a featured poet at the 50th anniversary celebration of the March on Washington, was keynote speaker, as I've said, at the Oregon Poetry Association's 2017 conference, and on August 28, 2013, was keynote speaker at the Oregon Historical Society screening of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. He is known nationally and internationally for his lyrical poetry, and he's driven here from Portland to read for us. Welcome, Emmett.
When I was young, I longed for love. Who would it be? What would it consist of? Daydreaming was my thing. Within its grandeur, I found new meaning. It helped me. Most often got the very best of me. Always revealing what I was made of. How when I was young, I longed for love. When I was young, I longed for love. Revealing were my inner thoughts. Romantic soliloquies are what they taught. Reciting them over and over again. I loved releasing the pale blue moon within. Always revealing what I was made of. How when I was young, like you, and like you, and like you, I longed for love. A poem entitled When I Was Young. Thank you. You can clap. It's all right. You can clap. I want to thank the River Road reading series, Joan Dewey, who I met at the Oregon Poetry Association last year, for this just humbling invitation to come down and actually share the poetry of Emmett Wheatfall. It was just a humbling invitation. I just want to thank everybody. There's a lovely setting to read poetry, and I've just been enjoying the poets that preceded me. Before I go further, I wanted to do something else. There is a couple here, and yesterday I got like a Facebook messaging saying, I see that you're going to be down here in Eugene. She said, Bill and I are coming. 2 great friends of mine, Bill Rutherford and Martha Rutherford, are here. They've been married 58 years. Would you give them a big hand? Bill is a tremendous artist, a very professional artist, a very noted artist. I really don't think that Eugene really knows what it has in its midst. If you haven't seen Bill Rutherford's work, it's been on display in the Oregon Art Museum, Portland Art Museum, just all over. So make sure you acquaint yourself with his work. Would you indulge me? I want to use the full breadth, length, and depth of my time. I drove all the way from Portland, Oregon, so I want to maximize the time that you made available for me. It's sometimes, and it's good to see Sam Roxy here as well. Great poet. He's going to be great in this state of Oregon. Sometimes you're trying to figure out, how do I put together a number of poems that kind of maybe make some sense or have some symmetry for these kinds of things. And so I wanted to title my reading, Poems Titled Beginning with the Letter A. You can laugh. Poems titled Beginning with the Letter A. So what I want to let you know first off is that I have a new work coming out. It'll be available for public purchase in the middle of May. It's by Fernwood Press, an impress of Barclay Press, and it's titled As Clean as a Bone. As Clean as a Bone. Now, where did I get that title from? Any of you heard of James Baldwin? James Baldwin, the great black intellectual. He has a statement, and this is the epigraph for the title poem for the book, and it's in poem's title, to begin with the title, the letter A. He said this: you want to write a sentence as clean as a bone. That is the goal. James Baldwin. So with as clean as a bone, that's what I set forth to do. And I'd like to share with you today the title poem, As Clean as a Bone. I have never seen a bone of mine. I have written a sentence, though, more than one sentence to be exact. At least 2 sentences I've written. For the epigraph above, I cleaned them. Any combination of 2 sentences, I have given myself to clean them, stripping them of flesh and sinew, displacing great regard for each bone, where be it for presence of soul, for the epigraph, I cleaned them, as that is the goal, Mr. Baldwin. Thank you very much. That was for Mr. Baldwin. He is since deceased, and just a great, great intellectual. If you've ever seen, he debated William F. Buckley. It's one of the great intellectual debates of all time. Before I continue, I want to pay some homage to the sun. How many of you enjoyed the sun today? I want to tell you, I drove down from Portland 2 hours, just got in the right lane, put some music on. GPS said I'll be here in 2 hours, and I just rolled with that sun out. So I want to pay some homage to the sun with some short verse. Is that okay? If it's not okay, I'm going to do it anyway. At its end, at its end. To shine today, the sun said yes. Stormy clouds appeared anyway. Rain did fall upon this the earth. At its end, it was okay, but of new the day draws near a dawn, with a selfless sense of its worth. I'm not opposed to reading a poem twice. You know why I do that? Because sometimes you'll hear something and you're still at the stop sign, and then the poet or the reader is going on and you missed it. To shine today, the sun said, yes. Stormier clouds appeared anyway. Rain did fall upon this the earth. At its end, it was okay. But of new the day draws near a dawn, with a selfless sense of its worth. A poem entitled At Its End. How many of you heard of Dylan Thomas? Most of you heard of Dylan Thomas. At sunset, salvation will come. This is a kind of elegy. Anybody know what an elegy is? I don't have a lot of time to do teaching. It's not a workshop, so I just got to let you know. At sunset, salvation will come, Martha. Of morning dew, count every blessing. Muster enough courage to do the math. Find surprising the ecology of arithmetic. Do not leave the morning to guessing. Fully awake from slumber of sleeping, a new day has displaced the past. What were once matters of the heart, night has dried remnants of weeping. Turn off the nightlight for effect. See darkness flee at full daybreak. Hear the cedar waxing whistle in song. View morning as the day's prefect. Read aloud the verse of Dylan Thomas. At sunset, salvation will come. Therefore, a drunken stupor must not arise. Single out wine and flatbread and hummus. Gold his metaphors and similes. Let them glisten like the untinted glass. Fashion an elegy befitting evening. Think of Dylan Thomas. me. Slow beat the evening drum addressing. Verse is the sunset's due. A new day will displace the past. Of morning dew, count every blessing. At sunset, salvation will come. Thank you very much. My neighbor next door, he's about 96 years old. He gets up every day and he goes for his walk. And we worry, because at 96, he doesn't move very fast. If he falls, he's out there by himself. But he gets up every day and he goes out and he walks. Every morning when I leave, there is bread for the birds, that he breaks up bread and puts it out there, and the birds gather. It's their morning routine. It's their morning breakfast. His wife died about 10 years ago, and we miss her. She's there right on the other side of our patio. And one day I was thinking about writing something about someone elderly, and I wrote this poem called As the Violin Plays On. As the violin plays on. Listen closely. I like to read slower because I want people to gather. Some of these are short verse. My neighbor is dying. At the age of 90, he is dying. He is a chapter in a long narrative. There are no more pages to turn, none more to fold. No placement for fading bookmarks. Nothing more is to be said as the violin plays on in the hands of his grandson. Let me read that again. My neighbor is dying. At the age of 90, he is dying. He is a chapter in a long narrative. There are no more pages to turn, none more to fold, no placement for fading bookmark. Nothing more is to be said as the violin plays on in the hands of his grandson. Can you imagine that? Something beautiful. I'm going to read this anyway. As an African American and a poet, sometimes I struggle because I go to poetry readings and sometimes I don't hear poetry that's written about my history or points in history that affect me, you know, as a Negro, as a Black, as an African American, whichever one you want to use. Just a short verse, Sam. It's called Antebellum. Antebellum. Listen closely. If Antebellum were a love song, I would not sing it. Neither would the Confederate flag hang from my front porch. There's been enough hanging and not enough love. Oh, y'all didn't get that. Hold on. If Antebellum were a love song, I would not sing it. Neither would the Confederate flag hang from my front porch. There's been enough hanging and not enough love. I think that's powerful. Watch this. We went running to the river, but the river never came to us. We crawled to the base of the mountain, but the mountain never bowed to us. At night, we wandered aimlessly in the forest, squinting our eyes in the eerie dark light of a moonless night and the twinkling stars just beyond popcorn-colored clouds. We stumbled through the desert, the red-hot desert, where it was white-hot, and scorpions crawled. Dead bones stayed still, and former watering holes looked like tarnished toilet bowls. We went down into the valley where disappointment captured us. We looked to our left and we looked to our right, only we couldn't see our way out. Then one of us looked up, then another, And the heavens opened up, and rain fell like 1,000 marbles rolling off a marble tabletop. And we got wet, and everything got wet. Even our captors got wet. It was like flood water rising in a flood, and we floated. Our captors, they began drowning one by one, refusing to take a hand. One by one they drowned, never floating to the surface. And ravens flew overhead. And we heard them making noise as they flew and flew and flew. Soon the sun began to shine, and a rainbow appeared in the sky. Then a voice, a big booming voice shouted, I'm not going to tell you kids again, get up, breakfast is ready. I was at a poetry reading once, and there was an editor from Midwest print, and I asked him, I said, what about African-American poetry? What about poetry by African-American poets? And he said, you know, I really don't read that kind of poetry. It just really doesn't speak to me. And it really hurt my heart, not because he didn't like African-American poetry, but what he failed to understand it as a poet, I can be a tree. I can be a bird. I can be a leaf on the water. I could be an Irish boy in love with Irish girls, and you would know it until you see my picture on the back of a book. A poem called Americana. Americana. There's no market for me other than illiteracy. I write what blacks won't buy. I create what whites won't read. I find Asians think less of me. Indians take no thought of me. The African from Africa doesn't identify with me. Sadly, others are unaware of me. Thus, the state of my poetry finds there is no market for me. Therefore, my sense of Americana, my shelf life, myself, my very life, in terms of poetic residency, there's no market for me other than illiteracy. Let's go back to a time in American history, Abigail for a day. Abigail for a day. You are Abigail for the day in another lifetime. Palace guards do not assail you for your brief privilege. Even the South Garden, with its rows of tulips, petunias, and rosebuds, welcome you. The Negro gardener, working the South Lawn, with the looks of a pictured lover on the cover of a Harlequin romance novel, discreetly eyes you. Knowing pomp, aristocracy, and slavery has prohibitions, you are Abigail for the day in another lifetime. Lightly illuminated, sunshine falls to place its approval upon the day's coronation. Despite palace doves taken to flight in hurried fashion in full array of their brazen whiteness. White doves and a princess always appear appropriate and fashionable for such a fairy tale. The horse-drawn carriage idly awaits your arrival. That top hat on you, the carriage driver, is to die for. And a death is coming. Every fairy tale has its ending. Every hidden slipper has its imagery. You are Abigail for the day in another lifetime. I will set this book down for the time being. Abigail for the day. Just a few more. Is that all right? Sure. Everybody doing okay? Yeah. You know, when I think of Eugene, I don't think of Eugene as a small town. But when you compare it against the size, of course, of Portland and Seattle and other areas like that, it's quite a bit smaller. A poem entitled "A Small Town." A small town. Maybe some of you could relate to this here in Virginia. A light blinks yellow. Its reason unknown. A brilliant idea. One of minute proportion of resolute relevance. Above the two-lane street it hangs, regulating time and space, of them going nowhere, ending up somewhere in a small town for some reason. A filling station, a convenience store, cafe and bar in a small town. That's all it needs. All it will ever be. A small town. The parking meter, the sheriff's car. Like vagrancy, a nuisance. Or kids on Saturday night. All 5 of them. Drag racing the strip. Agitating the streetlight that blinks yellow. Regulating time and space in a small town. Hills do not lie. They hide small towns with small people who have big hearts, small wallets. A single ATM machine. Progress. Progress in a small town. The president rolled through yesterday under blinking yellow light on his way to the big city as everyone lined the strip waving the flag, all 28 people and children held from school in a small town. In a small town. Thank you. Some people are religious, some are not. This is not intended to offend anybody, but I'm going to read it anyway. A sea of aborted babies. A sea of aborted babies. I've never dreamt about daffodils, taken seriously the plucking of 4-leaf clovers, cupped spring water in the palm of my hand, observed the moon mourn the dead. I've never seen a man walk on water, nor a man give birth for that matter. Women cartwheeling while wearing a skirt, a sea of aborted babies brought back to life. I've never had a revelation about self, considering being black an abnormality. American exceptionalism, absolute virtue. Gotten over the inevitability of death. I've never heard the wind speak English. The sun having set in the morning, called upon an evening tide to recede, gotten over the beauty of a newborn's birth. Although I have seen the light. I've seen the light. Don't flick a light switch if you need to know what I mean. Read John's Gospel, chapter 3, verse 19. Just a couple more, so we'll have time to fellowship. I know how to read. Two more short poems. Two more short poems. I like this. Listen closely. All of us who write, whether poetry or fiction or novels, a poem entitled A Million Poems. A Million Poems. I have yet to write a million poems, to pin them upon the public persona of my life, the inherent revelation that is to become my life, whose syntax will set forth my expressed meaning, whose certainty my diction will dictate in the plethora of a million poems I have yet to write. To speak them in the power of my personal presence, in the voice defining my essence, the perception marking the nature that is my character, where I am more than a passing thought of sight, where the meaning of me resides in the plethora of a million poems I have yet to write. A million poems. Let me close with this, because that's about my time this afternoon. Anybody ever written a manuscript and submitted it to a publisher and had it rejected? Anybody ever submitted a manuscript to an editor, and by the time the editor got through, you didn't recognize your manuscript? All of us have been there. The terror and the pain of rejection. I may read this poem to you twice, if that's okay. I hope I'm not violating any poetry rule. If I am, I'm establishing a new rule. It's titled, A Letter to the Editor. We usually don't want to write the editor because we might need to go back to him. Here we go. I have read Whitman, sought counsel from Hughes, reveled in Neruda, marveled at Frost. I find Brooks bold, Plath sophisticated, Lord a black lesbian, Hudson yet to be known. I have loved Dickinson, struggled with Gluck, found inspiration in Angelou, studied with Oliver. I see Walcott as fascinating. Enjoy affinity with Langston. W.S. Merwin, earthy. Collins, complex. Myself, unremarkable. Let me take you through it again. Anybody here have read Walt Whitman? Leaves of Grass. I've sought counsel from Hughes. Revel in Pablo Neruda. Marvel at Robert Frost. I find Gwendolyn Brooks, bold. Sylvia Plath, sophisticated. Audre Lorde, a black lesbian. Michelle Hudson, none of you know her. She's somebody that I met on Facebook, and she's a poet. Hudson yet to be known. I have loved Dickinson. How many heard of Dickinson? Struggle with Louise Gluck. I have struggled with her poetry. Found inspiration. Who cannot find inspiration in Angelou? We went to Old Country Sailors up there in Portland to eat, and I'm standing in the lobby, and they had a poem by Maya Angelou on the wall, and I did Scanyon on it. She was writing an iambic pentameter. I just read more to it, but I was inspired by her poetry. Then I see Derek Walcott, the great Caribbean poet, who recently died, one of the great poets of all time. I enjoy affinity with Langston Hughes. Many times say other poetry devices. He didn't use a semicolon or a comma or a period. He just writes the line and turns the line. It's earthy. You remember, you're listening. Billy Collins. What did I say about Billy Collins? Complex. I don't understand Billy Collins. Half the time I don't know what Billy Collins is talking about. And then I end the poem, myself, unremarkable.
Get out of here.
That's for you guys to do. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. Great to be able to share. Thank you, Congress.